The grading error. The grand archives of the Galactic Classification Board buzzed with the usual mundane activity of another standard cycle. Floating data screens cast their soft glow across the pristine white halls as various species went about their daily tasks of categorizing newly discovered worlds. High Counselor Xena Brightscale gently bobbed in her gravity suspension pod, her translucent tendrils waving lazily as she reviewed the morning reports. Her three primary eyes scanned through the documentation with practiced efficiency. After 200 cycles of service, very little surprised her anymore. High Counselor, the screech from Junior Analyst Pex, nearly caused her to spill her nutrient supplement. We have a situation, a serious situation. Xena's secondary eyes swiveled toward the young analyst, whose scales had turned an alarming shade of pale green. Calm yourself, Junior Analyst. What could possibly be so urgent? Pex's appendages trembled as he projected a holographic display. I was doing routine verification of our historical classification records when I found this. The display showed a simple planetary classification entry. Sol 3 Local Designation Earth. Classification Class 0. Status Harmless. Recommended approach safe for immediate diplomatic contact. Notable features mostly water, some land masses, primitive bipedal species. I failed to see the problem, Xena said, her tendrils curling with mild annoyance. It's a standard Class 0 world. We have millions of them in our database. That's just it, High Counselor Pex's voice cracked. I cross-referenced the atmospheric composition data. This planet has oxygen, as a free radical, in its atmosphere. Xena's primary eyes widened. That's impossible. Class 0 worlds are stable environments. You're suggesting. It gets worse. Pex frantically pulled up more data. Surface gravity 9.8 ms2. Temperature variations from -50 to 50 to 50 degrees Celsius. Active plate tectonics, regular electromagnetic storms, and the dominant species. He paused, his breathing apparatus wheezing. They're endurance predators with redundant organs who can regenerate damaged tissue. The nutrient supplement definitely spilled this time as Xena's tendrils went rigid. By the sacred archives, this is a Class 12 Deathworld. How did we miss this? The emergency alert system activated automatically, responding to the spike in stress pheromones. Red lights pulsed through the archives as more classification board members gathered around the display. When was this classification made? Xena demanded, her voice sharp with urgency. Pex's appendages clicked nervously across the console. That's the other problem, High Counselor. It was classified 3 cycles ago, and we've already initiated diplomatic contact. The assembled aliens froze in horror. Senior Archivist Lum dropped her data tablet, shattering the silence. 3 cycles ago, but that means... Yes, Xena whispered, her voice heavy with dread. We sent our most junior diplomatic team. The standard protocol for Class 0 worlds. The ones we send to practice on harmless planets. Someone squeaked from the back of the crowd. Precisely. Xena's tendrils coiled tightly around her gravity pod. We sent Ambassador Nick Starweaver, fresh out of the academy, to make first contact with a species that considers exposure to nuclear radiation a pleasant recreational activity. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft whimper of Junior Analyst Pex as he pulled up one final piece of data: the scheduled time for first contact. Oh no, Xena breathed, all 6 eyes fixed on the countdown timer. They're landing today. The emergency klaxons seemed to grow louder as the full impact of their mistake sank in. They had sent their most inexperienced diplomatic team, with minimal security and no survival gear, to meet a species that had evolved on a planet that should have been impossible to inhabit. Someone, Xena announced to the petrified crowd, is going to have to explain this to the Grand Council. And it's not going to be me. She paused, then added with grim humor, I'm taking my retirement. Effective immediately. No one laughed. They were too busy calculating just how many regulations they had violated by miscategorizing a Class 12 Deathworld as a peaceful garden planet. The number was somewhere between all of them and more than previously thought possible. The classification error glowed mockingly on the display, A simple bureaucratic mistake that was about to create the biggest diplomatic incident since the Great Sneezing Crisis of Cycle 2749, 3 cycles earlier. Professor Yulara sat nervously in the review chamber, their bioluminescent spots flickering with anxiety as they faced the classification board. The young xenoanthropologist's first solo classification project had turned into the biggest mistake in galactic history. "Please explain," High Counselor Xena said, her tendrils twitching with barely contained frustration, "how you observed Earth for a full rotation and concluded it was a Class 0 world." Yulara pulled up their original observation notes, voice wavering. "Well, you see, I started with their entertainment broadcasts. Such a peaceful species. They spend hours lying completely motionless on flat surfaces near large bodies of dihydrogen monoxide." "You mean beaches?" someone interrupted, "where they deliberately expose themselves to UV radiation." "Oh no, Yulara brightened. They apply protective chemicals first, very safety conscious. And they have these charming rituals where they gather around combustion pits and carbonize organic matter before consuming it." Xena's gravity pod wobbled. "You're describing barbecues." "Exactly. See how careful they are with their food preparation. And they're young, so sheltered that they need special protective equipment just to engage in recreational activities. Helmets, pads, supervision." The review chamber erupted in murmurs as Yulara continued, completely oblivious. They even have dedicated recovery chambers in their dwellings where they regularly enter a state of unconsciousness for several hours. Clearly, a species that requires so much rest must be quite fragile. Professor Senior Archivist Lum interjected, "Are you referring to bedrooms? And sleep?" "Yes, they're so vulnerable they become completely defenseless for 1/3 of their planetary rotation. It's adorable, really. And their dedication to physical preservation. They have special chambers where they deliberately raise their core temperature while consuming nothing but filtered, atmospheric elements." "Saunas," someone whispered in horror. "They're voluntarily cooking themselves." Yulara nodded enthusiastically. "And such peaceful gatherings. I observed one where hundreds of humans packed themselves into an enclosed space, jumping rhythmically, while vibrations at potentially damaging decibel levels pulsed through the air." That's a concert," Peck said weakly. "They do that for entertainment." "Precisely. So harmonious. Although I will admit some of their practices confused me. Like their habit of propelling themselves down frozen dihydrogen monoxide slopes with artificial appendages strapped to their locomotion limbs." The chamber grew quieter with each example as the horrible truth sank in. "Oh, and their competitive events. They gather in huge numbers to watch members of their species repeatedly collide with each other while fighting over an inflated animal hide. The participants wear armor, obviously because they're so delicate." "Football," Xena said faintly. "You're describing football?" "Yes. And the sweetest thing, they're so concerned about personal safety that they have special facilities where they practice emergency scenarios. Lifting heavy objects repeatedly, running nowhere on moving platforms, simulating climbing." "Those are gyms," several voices shouted at once. "Their caution extends to their vehicles too. They encase themselves in protective shells of processed minerals and polymers just to travel short distances. And their aerial transport. Multiple redundant systems, backup power, emergency oxygen." Xena's tendrils had wrapped so tightly around her gravity pod they were beginning to cut off circulation. "Professor Yulara, those aren't excessive safety measures. Those are minimal requirements for their survival craft. But look at how they nurture their young. They create special enclosures filled with scaled-down versions of dangerous scenarios. Elevated platforms connected by unstable bridges, vertical poles for controlled falling, rotating mechanisms that deliberately induce dizziness." "Playgrounds," Lum groaned. "You're describing playgrounds?" "And they're constantly consuming chemicals. Stimulants, depressants, mood alterators. Clearly a species so dependent on artificial supplements must be naturally docile." The chamber fell silent as Yulara proudly displayed more images. Humans jumping out of perfectly functional aircraft. Humans deliberately navigating areas of rapid vertical water displacement. Humans climbing frozen water formations with sharp metal appendages. Their art was most enlightening too. They create elaborate fictional scenarios about surviving planetary disasters, alien invasions, and apocalyptic events. Obviously, this shows their active imagination, since such a gentle species would never actually. Professor Zena interrupted, all six eyes closed in pain. Those aren't fantasies. They're training documentaries. Yulara's spots flickered in confusion. But they seemed so happy. Always seeking out new challenges, exploring hostile environments, deliberately placing themselves in. Their voice trailed off as realization finally dawned. What you've described, Zena said slowly, is not a fragile species requiring extensive safety measures. You've documented a race of adrenaline-addicted survival machines who get bored so easily they invented new ways to risk their lives for entertainment. Oh, Yulara's spots went dim. Oh no. Oh yes, Zena continued. And thanks to your classification, we're sending Ambassador Nick Starweaver, whose species evolved on a planet with all the environmental stability of a padded relaxation chamber, to make first contact. But surely they'll be gentle with a new species, Yulara asked hopefully. All my observations showed them to be very protective of smaller, more delicate life forms. The images on display changed to humans keeping apex predators as companion animals, cooing over venomous arachnids, and rehabilitating wounded carnivores. Right, Zena said, her tendrils uncoiling in resignation. Meeting adjourned. I need to go draft the longest correction memo in classification board history. And Professor Yulara. Yes, High Counselor. Next time, maybe don't base an entire species classification on their social media feeds. Pre-contact briefing, Galactic Standard Time 3479.2. Ambassador Nick Starweaver stood before her small diplomatic team aboard the contact vessel Gentle Approach, reviewing their final preparations for humanity's welcome to the galactic community. Her iridescent scales gleamed under the ship's soft lighting as she gestured to the holographic display. Now remember, everyone, she said, her voice carrying the rehearsed confidence of someone determined not to show their nervousness, we're dealing with a Class 0 civilization. This should be a perfect first mission for all of us. Security Chief Rax Moonweaver, fresh from the academy and chosen specifically because of his non-threatening demeanor, raised one of his 4 appendages. I've prepared the standard protective gear, Ambassador. Soft shell environmental suits rated for minimal impact. Excellent. Though we probably won't need them. According to the classification, these humans are quite delicate. Their environment is so safe they rarely leave their dwellings, except for essential tasks. The ship's medical officer, Dr. Petra Sunspell, consulted her datapad. I've stocked our medical bay with grade 1 healing patches and mild mood stabilizers. Nothing too strong we wouldn't want to overwhelm their systems. Perfect. And what about our cultural liaison? Senior diplomat Cax Brightweaver stepped forward, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing with pride. I've studied their primary greeting rituals extensively. Apparently they press their upper appendages together in something called a handshake. I've practiced the motion for hours to ensure I don't apply too much pressure. Remember, Nix added, even slight physical contact could be overwhelming for them. We should probably offer them permission to retreat and rest frequently during our meeting. The ship's pilot, Navigator Luna Swiftstream, cleared their throat nervously. Ambassador? I've been analyzing their transport technology. They seem to use chemical propulsion systems that create significant gravitational stress. Should we perhaps adjust our landing approach to be extra gentle? Absolutely. We don't want to frighten them with our superior technology. Set all systems to minimal power, and make sure our artificial gravity is at its lowest setting. We wouldn't want anyone getting hurt. The team spent the next hour reviewing their emergency protocols, which mostly consisted of various ways to avoid startling the humans. They had even brought along special sound dampeners for their equipment, assuming the noise might disturb the sensitive earthlings. Now Nix continued, pulling up an image of their designated landing site. The humans have prepared what they call a military base for our arrival. Obviously, this must be their most cushioned and secure location. Dr. Petra studied the image of the high-security military installation with its reinforced walls and armed guards. Look how much protection they need. The poor things must be terrified of their own atmosphere. Which reminds me, Rax added, checking his security protocols, I've modified our standard greeting lights to 1/10 brightness. We wouldn't want to damage their visual processors. The briefing was interrupted by Navigator Luna's startled squeak. Ambassador, I'm detecting multiple fast-moving objects in the planet's atmosphere. Ah, yes, Nix said confidently, consulting her datapad. Those must be their jet fighters, obviously an honor guard to ensure no natural predators disturb our landing. How thoughtful of them. The team watched as the fighter jets performed a series of complex aerial maneuvers around their ship. Such dedication, Cax remarked. Look how they strain their fragile bodies just to welcome us. I've prepared special nutrient cubes for the humans, Dr. Petra announced proudly. All certified safe for Class 0 digestive systems. No trace elements stronger than diluted glucose. Meanwhile, in their cargo hold, they had stocked enough medical supplies to handle paper cuts and mild anxiety, entertainment programs suitable for easily startled species, and a variety of soft, cushioned seating arrangements. One last thing, Nix said, her scales shifting to a professional shade of blue. Remember that humans require frequent periods of unconsciousness. They call it sleep. We should be prepared to pause our discussions every few hours so they can rest. The diplomatic team nodded seriously, making notes about providing quiet spaces and soft surfaces for their hosts' anticipated napping needs. And what about their atmospheric requirements? Luna asked, adjusting the ship's environmental controls. Standard oxygen mix, but very diluted, Nix assured them. They're obviously not adapted to handle pure elements. I've had the atmospheric processors set to create the gentlest possible mix. The team continued their preparations, carefully labeling all their equipment with warning signs about potential minimal risks. They even brought along what they considered emergency rations, food so bland it wouldn't overwhelm what they assumed were humanity's delicate taste buds. As they began their final descent, Rax suddenly looked concerned. Ambassador, I'm detecting what appears to be artificial radiation barriers around the landing site. The humans must have gone to such trouble to protect us from their weak electromagnetic fields. How considerate, Nix beamed, completely misinterpreting the military-grade scanning equipment. See? This is exactly why Class 0 worlds are perfect for first assignments. Everything is so carefully controlled and safe. The ship's sensors picked up radio communications from the surface. The humans were apparently scrambling additional escorts for their protection. Their dedication to safety protocols is admirable, Cax noted, as dozens of heavily armed vehicles took up positions around the landing zone. Remember everyone, Nix said in her final briefing, we represent the Galactic Council. Let's show these gentle humans how advanced civilizations conduct themselves. No sudden movements, speak softly, and be prepared to call for breaks if they show any signs of stress. The team adjusted their translators to what they considered soothing volumes and did final checks on their minimal impact equipment. None of them noticed the slight error message flashing on their cultural database, warning of a pending urgent update to Earth's classification status. As Gentle Approach began its landing sequence, Ambassador Nick Starweaver felt confident this would be the smoothest first contact in galactic history. After all, what could possibly go wrong on a Class 0 world? The last thing they did before opening their airlock was activate their emergency beacon set to such a low power output it barely registered on their own instruments, just in case they needed to call for help without alarming the humans, of course. They had no idea they were about to meet a species that considered extreme ironing pressing clothes while skydiving a legitimate hobby. The doors of Gentle Approach hissed open with a sound that Ambassador Nick Starweaver hoped wouldn't startle the delicate humans. She led her team down the landing ramp, moving with exaggerated slowness to avoid causing any distress. The welcoming committee stood waiting on the tarmac. At their head was human Ambassador Samantha Blackwood, looking resplendent in her formal military uniform, with Captain Maya Sterling at her side. The rest of the human delegation consisted of various military personnel, scientists, and government officials. Greetings, gentle beings of Earth, Nix began, her translator set to its softest volume. We come in peace and hope we haven't alarmed you with our arrival. Ambassador Blackwood stepped forward, extending her hand. Welcome to Earth. We're excited to. She paused, noticing how the alien delegation had collectively flinched at her normal speaking volume. Is everything all right? Please, Nick said soothingly, there's no need to strain your vocals. We understand if you need to whisper. And please, Don't feel obligated to remain standing if it's too strenuous. Blackwood exchanged confused glances with Captain Sterling. I assure you, we're quite comfortable. Would you like to proceed to the conference room? We've prepared refreshments. The alien delegation followed cautiously, their medical officer Dr. Petra Sunspell hovering anxiously with a medical scanner. They entered the base's main conference facility, where a generous spread of food and drinks awaited them. Oh my, Nix gasped as she watched a human casually lift a carafe of dark liquid. Please be careful with that heavy container. It's just coffee, Captain Sterling said, taking a long sip of the steaming beverage. The alien delegation watched in horror as she willingly consumed what their scanners identified as a potent stimulant laced with acid compounds. She's deliberately ingesting poison, Dr. Petra whispered frantically to Nix. Should we administer emergency detoxification? Before they could react, Ambassador Blackwood was already pouring glasses of another liquid. Would anyone care for some wine? It's a local vintage. Security Chief Rax Moonweaver's instruments went haywire. Ambassador Nix, they're offering us fermented ethanol, a literal neurotoxin. Now, shall we discuss our cultural exchange program? Blackwood continued cheerfully. We thought we'd start with some light activities. Perhaps you'd enjoy watching our annual base jump festival next week. Base jump, Cax Brightweaver queried nervously. Oh yes. It's where people leap off tall structures with parachutes. Very relaxing. Or if you prefer something more exciting, we could take you to see the Volcano Surfing Championship. The alien delegation huddled together protectively as Blackwood pulled up images on the conference room screen. Humans deliberately falling from heights. Humans riding boards down active lava flows. Humans wrestling with aquatic predators. These are your relaxation activities? Nix asked faintly. Well, these are just the casual ones, Captain Sterling chimed in. If you want real excitement, I could show you my wingsuit collection. Nothing beats flying through mountain crevices at 200 miles per hour. Dr. Petra's medical scanner was now emitting a continuous high-pitched whine. Ambassador, she whispered urgently, their hormone levels indicate they're experiencing pleasure from describing these near-death experiences. And here's our afternoon schedule, Blackwood continued, oblivious to the aliens' mounting horror. We thought you might enjoy a traditional Earth barbecue. We'll gather around an open flame, expose organic matter to extreme temperatures, and then consume it while telling stories about our most dangerous adventures. Security Chief Rax was practically vibrating with stress. They deliberately gather around fire. For entertainment. Speaking of entertainment, Captain Sterling added brightly, we've organized a little musical performance for this evening. Hope you don't mind heavy metal. Heavy metal? Nix inquired weakly. You'll love it. The bass frequencies alone can rupture internal organs if you stand close enough to the speakers. Really gets the blood pumping. The alien delegation watched in mute horror as more humans entered the room, casually carrying loads that should have required mechanical assistance, their enhanced musculature visible even through their clothing. One of them was sporting what appeared to be deliberate decorative damage to their epidermis, something called tattoos achieved through repeated puncturing of their skin with ink-bearing needles. Oh, and before I forget, Blackwood said, checking her notes, we should warn you about our planetary defense systems. We noticed your ship's emergency beacon was rather weak, so we took the liberty of boosting the signal. Wouldn't want you to get lost in space. The aliens froze. You detected our emergency beacon and modified it. Of course. The encryption was pretty basic, so our AI systems had no trouble upgrading it. We also took the liberty of enhancing your ship's radiation shielding while you were landing. Noticed it was a bit below our safety standards. Dr. Petra's medical scanner finally gave up and shut down in protest. Now, Captain Sterling said, rubbing her hands together enthusiastically, who's ready for some team-building exercises? We've got a great obstacle course set up. Nothing too challenging, just some barbed wire crawls, wall climbing, and a small fire pit to jump over. Ambassador Nix swayed slightly in her environmental suit. You consider that not challenging? Oh no, that's just the warm-up. The real fun starts when we break out the jet skis and parachutes. The final straw came when a human child wandered into the conference room, casually licking a frozen treat that registered on their scanners as containing enough sugar to send a Class 0 species into toxic shock. Fascinating devices you have there, Blackwood noted, gesturing to their medical scanners. Though they seem to be having some trouble with our atmospheric readings. Would you like our engineers to take a look? They love tinkering with new tech. The thought of humans tinkering with their sensitive equipment was too much. Ambassador Nick Starweaver, graduate of the Galactic Diplomatic Academy with honors, did something no ambassador had done in 10,000 cycles of diplomatic history. She fainted. As the alien delegation rushed to assist their fallen leader, Captain Sterling turned to Ambassador Blackwood with concern. Was it something we said? Meanwhile, Dr. Petra was frantically trying to process the medical readings from their brief time on Earth. According to her instruments, these humans weren't just surviving on a death world, they were actively seeking ways to make it more dangerous for fun. The last thing Nix heard before losing consciousness was a human asking if anyone wanted to go skydiving later to unwind. Somewhere in the Galactic archives, Professor Yulara's classification report burst into flames spontaneously, which ironically would have delighted the humans had they been there to witness it. After the fainting incident, the diplomatic team retreated to their ship for what they called an emergency recalibration period. In reality, they were huddled around their data screens, trying to make sense of humanity's recent space exploration data that Ambassador Blackwood had shared as a gesture of goodwill. "This can't be right," Navigator Luna Swiftstream muttered, triple-checking the coordinates. According to these records, humans have established colonies on Proxima b, Kepler 186f, and oh no. "What is it?" Nix asked, still holding an ice pack to her head from her diplomatic mishap. "They've set up their largest off-world settlement on Neo 427. They're calling it New Australia." The entire team froze. Neo 427 was the textbook example of a Class 0 world, no tectonic activity, perfectly stable atmosphere, constant comfortable temperature, and absolutely nothing that could possibly harm any living being. "But why?" Dr. Petra asked, bewildered. "That planet is completely safe." Just then, their communication screen lit up with an incoming transmission from New Australia. The human colony's governor, Benjamin Danger Thompson, appeared on screen, grinning broadly. "G-Day, alien friends. Heard you were interested in our little setup here. Bit boring at first, but we've made some improvements." The aliens watched in mounting horror as the camera panned across the colony. Where Neo 427's perfectly flat surface had once been a marvel of geological stability, the humans had constructed artificial mountains for climbing with their hands. "Had to do something about this snooze fest of a gravity well," Thompson continued cheerfully. "So we installed gravity fluctuation generators. Makes each step a surprise. Really keeps you on your toes during the morning jog." Security Chief Rax's appendages trembled as he noted the modifications. They're deliberately making a Class 0 world more dangerous. "Oh, you noticed our environmental upgrades," Thompson beamed. "Wait till you see what we did with the atmosphere. Added some nice unpredictable weather patterns. Nothing spices up a Tuesday like a random tornado." The camera switched to a group of colonists surfing on artificially generated plasma waves. "Course, the kids were getting a bit restless without any real challenges," Thompson explained. "So we introduced some engineered predator species. Really helps build character." Dr. Petra's medical scanner, recently repaired, promptly broke again. "And here's our pride and joy," Thompson said, pointing to a massive structure in the distance. "The Extreme Sports Megaplex, Zero-G wrestling, antimatter surfing, quantum uncertainty parkour, you name it, we've built it." Nix managed to find her voice. But Neo 427 was perfect. Completely safe." "Exactly," Thompson laughed. "Boring as watching paint dry in zero gravity. But don't worry, we've fixed that. Now the paint is slightly radioactive and might try to eat you." The transmission continued as Thompson proudly showed off more improvements. They'd transformed the planet's stable crust into what they called an adventure zone, complete with artificial volcanoes, random sinkholes, and something called surprise geysers. "For the really hardcore thrill seekers," Thompson explained, "we've got our special Deathworld simulator tries to recreate Earth conditions. But honestly, it's a bit tame compared to the original. The aliens watched footage of humans cheerfully going about their daily lives in environments that would give a safety inspector nightmares. Children played in moderate acid rain. Teenagers practiced low-risk activities like quantum tunneling through solid matter. Adults treated near-death experiences like minor inconveniences. And here's our latest project, Thompson said excitedly. We're terraforming the northern continent to include what we call random event generators. Never know if you're going to get a lightning storm, a dimensional rift, or a good old-fashioned earthquake. Navigator Luna pulled up data from other human colonies. It was the same everywhere. Perfectly safe worlds transformed into what humans considered livable environments. They'd added dangerous fauna to empty ecosystems, created artificial natural disasters, and seemed genuinely puzzled by the concept of too much excitement. Oh, and we're expanding, Thompson added. Found a few more Class 0 worlds in the nearby systems. Planning to set up what we call extreme tourism destinations. Got to give the holidaymakers something to write home about. The diplomatic team watched in silent horror as humans demonstrated their idea of basic safety precautions, which seemed to consist mainly of saying "hold my beer" before doing something that defied several laws of physics. Any of you lot want to come visit? Thompson offered. We've just finished our magnetosphere destabilization project. Makes for some really interesting aurora displays. Might melt your face off if you look directly at them, but that's half the fun. Ambassador Nix finally understood why Earth's classification had gone so wrong. They had been looking for signs of a species adapting to survive in a harsh environment. Instead, they had found a species that got bored with harsh environments and actively worked to make them harsher. One last thing, Thompson said proudly. We're thinking of applying for status as a training world for your junior diplomats. Figure if they can handle New Australia, they can handle anything. The transmission ended, leaving the alien delegation in stunned silence. Finally, Dr. Petra spoke up. Ambassador, she said carefully, I believe we need to create a new classification. These humans, they don't just survive Deathworlds. They export them. Agreed, Nix replied weakly. And we should probably warn the Council about their expansion plans. They're not colonizing new worlds, they're turning perfectly good Class 0 planets into what they call entertaining environments. The team watched as another transmission came in, this time from a human colony on a gas giant's moon. They had apparently found the constant methane storms too predictable and were working on ways to make them more interesting. As Security Chief Rax updated their report to the Council, he added an urgent warning: under no circumstances should humans be informed of the locations of additional Class 0 worlds. They will consider them fixer-uppers. The diplomatic meeting was interrupted by blaring alarms. Red lights flashed throughout the base as Captain Maya Sterling's comm unit crackled to life. Captain, 3 Scarlet Brigade warships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're demanding we surrender the alien delegation. The alien diplomatic team huddled together in terror. The Scarlet Brigade was notorious across the galaxy for their brutality. Ambassador Nix's scales turned pale. We're doomed. Our ship has no weapons, and our emergency beacon is being jammed. Captain Sterling finished, but she was grinning. Finally, some action. Ambassador Blackwood, permission to show our guests how we handle uninvited company. Blackwood nodded, already shrugging off her formal jacket. Give them hell, Captain. The aliens watched in confusion as the humans showed no signs of fear. Instead, they seemed excited. Sterling grabbed her comm unit. All hands, protocol spicy time. I repeat, protocol spicy time is now in effect. What's protocol spicy time? Nix whispered to Dr. Petra. Their answer came in the form of Captain Sterling vaulting over the conference table and ripping open what looked like a simple decorative panel, revealing an arsenal of weapons. Standard Earth hospitality, she explained, tossing pulse rifles to her team. Always be prepared to protect your guests. The base's defensive systems roared to life. But instead of the expected automated response, the aliens saw humans physically running to battle stations, laughing and placing bets on who would score the first hit. Don't worry, Ambassador Blackwood assured them, strapping on what looked suspiciously like powered combat armor hidden under her formal wear. This is just a light workout for us. Outside, the pirate ships launched their first wave of attacks. The base's shields flared under the assault, but held firm. Then the humans counterattacked. Fighter pilots sprinted to their jets, arguing over who got to try the new experimental maneuvers. Ground crews loaded weapons while discussing optimal explosion patterns like they were critiquing art. Even the base's cafeteria staff got involved, converting their cooking equipment into improvised artillery with disturbing efficiency. "That's not regulation use of a pressure cooker," Security Chief Rack squeaked as he watched a cook launch what appeared to be superheated coffee at an enemy dropship. The pirates, expecting an easy target, instead found themselves facing humans who treated Mortal Kombat like an entertaining diversion. Fighter pilots pulled maneuvers that their ship's computers insisted were impossible. Ground troops used the aliens' own safety barriers as improvised trampolines to reach better firing positions. "Watch this," Sterling shouted, running straight at a pirate breaching pod. She grabbed the hydraulic door as it opened and ripped it off its hinges, using it as a makeshift shield while clearing the entire pod with her sidearm. In wanting to try that move. The alien delegation watched in stunned silence as the humans systematically dismantled the pirate assault, treating lethal danger like a party game. Soldiers called out kill counts like they were keeping score in a sports match. Engineers turned repair tools into weapons with terrifying creativity. "Did that human just punch a combat drone?" Dr. Petra asked faintly. "Nah, looks more like a suplex to me," Ambassador Blackwood replied casually, using her dinner plate as an impromptu throwing star to take down a pirate sniper. The battle reached its climax when the pirate commander, desperate to salvage the situation, threatened to ram the base with their flagship. The human response was not what anyone expected. "Oh no, you don't," Sterling laughed, hijacking the base's gravitational tether system. "You know what they say, the bigger they are." She activated the system, using the base itself as a giant slingshot to launch debris at the flagship. The pirates, faced with humans who treated life or death combat as light entertainment, finally broke. Their retreat was hastened by the base's kitchen staff, who had somehow weaponized leftover meatloaf. As the dust settled, Captain Sterling approached the alien delegation, still buzzing with adrenaline. "Sorry about that interruption. Anyone up for a celebratory skydiving session? Nothing like a near-death experience to work up an appetite." The aliens stared at her, then at the battlefield where humans were already cleaning up, comparing combat footage like they were reviewing holiday photos. "I believe," Ambassador Nix said weakly, "we need to update our assessment of human recreational activities." "And their classification," Dr. Petra added, watching a soldier juggle live grenades to entertain the guests. "Aw, this was nothing," Sterling said, helping a shell-shocked alien to their feet. "Wait till you see how we party 1 month later." Galactic Council emergency session. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with nervous energy as High Counselor Zena Brightscale presented the findings from Earth's first contact mission. Distinguished members of the Council. She began, her tendrils twitching nervously. "We face an unprecedented situation. We must create an entirely new classification system because humans have, and I quote from Captain Sterling's report, made our current one look like a safety rating for stuffed toys." The assembled representatives shifted uncomfortably in their gravity pods as Zena displayed the latest human exploration data. "In just 1 month since contact, humans have labeled 80% of our space as, and I quote again, the most boring thing since watching antimatter decay. They've submitted 2,749 permit applications to make various solar systems more exciting." A representative from the Preservation Committee raised an appendage. "What exactly do they mean by more exciting?" "They want to reroute quantum filaments to create what they call cosmic obstacle courses. They've also requested permission to use several unstable neutron stars for what they termed extreme surfing competitions." The council chamber erupted in horrified whispers. "Furthermore," Zena continued, "they've offered to help upgrade our emergency response systems, claiming our current safety protocols are, and these are Ambassador Blackwood's exact words, cute but pathetically inadequate. But our safety systems are rated for Class 15 catastrophes," someone protested. "Yes, well, humans apparently consider those warm-up exercises. They've already drafted plans to enhance them with what they call real safety features, starting with antimatter-powered emergency thrusters and ending with something called explosive decompression fun slides. The Council's chief architect fainted at that last part. Therefore, Xena concluded, I propose a new classification, Class H, for human. The rating system will work in reverse. The more dangerous something is, the more likely humans will want to vacation there. She displayed the new scale. H1 certain death for normal species humans rate as mild entertainment. H5 reality bending hazards humans consider suitable for family outings. H10 laws of physics breaking down humans call it weekend adventure. H15 existence itself becomes questionable humans term it properly exciting. And what about Earth itself, asked a nervous council member. Earth has been classified as H because humans keep finding new ways to make it more dangerous faster than we can update the scale. As the council debated the new system, reports came in from across the galaxy. Humans were already organizing extreme tourism packages to previously quarantined zones. They'd started a petition to declare black holes suitable for recreational diving. Someone named Benjamin Danger Thompson was selling tickets to what he called real fireworks shows on the surface of active neutron stars. One final note, Xena added, her tendrils curling in resignation. The humans have generously offered to host next cycle's Galactic Council meeting on Earth. They promise to, and I quote, keep things mild and suitable for beginners. The Council voted unanimously to hold all future meetings via hologram. As the session concluded, Xena received one last report. Humans had just discovered the void between dimensions, previously considered the most terrifying place in existence. They were already planning to build a theme park there. Maybe, Xena muttered to herself, we should have stayed in the boring part of space after all.